My suitcases were stacked on the driveway like rejected cargo when Dylan handed me the eviction notice. 24 hours to leave the house I paid for. Inside. His mistress poured wine while his mother watched via video call, telling me to know my place. I did not cry. I simply memorized the scene. They believed they were discarding a wife, but they had just declared war on the secret owner of the company behind their $8.4 billion deal. My name is Marianne Caldwell. I was 36 years old, standing in the driving rain outside the wrought iron gates of the estate in Wexler Heights, when I realized my marriage was not a partnership but a long-term con that had finally cashed out. I had just driven 4 hours from a logistics conference, my mind still humming with supply chain data, only to find the driveway blocked. My personal belongings, clothes, books, shoes were stacked in soaking wet piles on the pavement like rejected cargo. They had not even bothered to zip the suitcases properly. Dylan Mercer stood on the sheltered stone steps of the portico. He remained perfectly dry, wearing the navy cashmere sweater I had purchased for his birthday. He watched the rain soak into my silk blouse with the indifference of a stranger. As I stepped out of my car, the water running cold down my neck, he did not offer an umbrella. He extended a single, crisp sheet of paper. "You have 24 hours to vacate the premises," Dylan said, his voice flat and rehearsed. "If you try to enter the main house, I will have the security patrol remove you as a trespasser. They are already parked across the street." I looked past his shoulder. The front door was wide open, casting a warm, golden light onto the wet stones. Blair Kincaid was standing in the foyer. She was not hiding. She was leaning against the doorframe, holding a glass of my vintage Pinot Noir, looking entirely at home. My eyes locked onto her left hand. On her ring finger sat the Mercer family crest ring, heavy gold with an onyx inlay. It was the same ring Dylan had sworn was locked in a safety deposit box because it was too valuable for everyday wear. Now, it was on her finger. Dylan raised his phone, turning the screen toward me. Patricia Mercer's face filled the display, the video connection slightly lagging but her expression sharp enough to cut glass. She did not ask why her son was evicting his wife in a storm. She looked bored. "Marianne," Patricia said, her voice tinny through the rain. "Don't make this difficult. You should know your position by now. You were always efficient with the bills. But let's be honest. You were the funding. Blair is the future." I did not scream. I did not drop to my knees and beg. A strange, icy calm settled over me, slowing my pulse. I took a step back and began to record the data. I checked my watch. It was 6:45 in the evening. I memorized the license plate of the private security vehicle idling 50 feet away. I noted that Dylan was avoiding eye contact, focusing on the wet paper in his hand. I looked at the eviction notice. It cited irreconcilable differences and immediate dissolution of residency. I reached for my phone and opened the smart home security app, intending to save the footage of this interaction. A red banner flashed across the screen. "Access denied." Administrative privileges had been revoked 3 hours ago via a master override. That code existed only in my physical safe inside the library. They had cracked it. Suddenly, a notification from my cloud backup popped up. It was a clip saved automatically before the system kicked me out. I tapped it. The video showed Blair standing in my kitchen earlier that afternoon. She looked directly into the security lens, smiled a slow, predatory smile, and mouthed 2 words: "Game over." She wanted me to see it. She wanted me to know that she had not just taken my husband. She had taken my sanctuary. "Are we done here?" Dylan asked, checking his phone as if he had a meeting to get to. "Enjoy the wine," I said, my voice steady, betraying nothing of the tremor in my hands. It pairs well with what is coming. I turned around and walked back to my car. I did not touch the suitcases. I left them rotting in the rain. As I slid into the driver's seat and locked the doors, I looked at the house one last time. It was a beautiful structure, purchased with my bonuses, maintained with my salary, and filled with my effort. But as I engaged the transmission and drove away into the dark, wet night, I realized something terrifyingly simple. They thought they were evicting a heartbroken wife. They had no idea they had just triggered a forensic audit. They had 24 hours to lock me out. I had 24 hours to burn their entire financial reality to the ground. I drove to a corporate short-term rental downtown, avoiding the hotels where Dylan or his mother might have contacts. The room was sterile, smelling of lemon polish and recycled air, but it had a hardwired internet connection and a heavy deadbolt. I did not bother unpacking the few wet clothes I had thrown into the back seat. Instead, I set up my war room on the glass dining table. My arsenal was small but precise, a biometric locked document safe I kept in my trunk, and my personal laptop, which had never touched the Mercer family Wi-Fi network. I cracked a bottle of water and opened the books. Not the sanitized summaries Dylan showed me over dinner, but the raw data feeds I had mirrored from our joint accounts months ago. Just to keep the household budget balanced, I began to filter the transaction logs, looking for anomalies. It took me 40 minutes to find the leak. It was a recurring monthly transfer, labeled simply as consulting retainer, flowing out of our investment liquidity fund into an entity called Cindervale Advisory LLC. The amounts were inconsistent, ranging from $4,000 to $12,000, always just under the threshold that would trigger an automatic fraud alert from the bank. I stared at the name, Cindervale. It sounded like a bad joke. A memory clawed its way to the surface. 3 months ago, I had visited my father-in-law, Richard Mercer, while he was recovering from hip surgery at the rehabilitation center. He had been groggy, his hand shaking as he tried to hold a cup of tea, but his mind had been sharp. Marianne, Richard had whispered, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. The accounts. I saw a withdrawal. Who is Cindervale Dylan had walked in at that exact moment, carrying a bouquet of flowers that looked too expensive and entirely performative. He had laughed, a smooth, practiced sound that did not reach his eyes. "Dad, you are confusing the accounts again," Dylan had said, patting Richard's shoulder a little too hard. "It is just tax optimization. You need to rest. The medication is making you paranoid." I had let it go then, trusting my husband over a man on heavy painkillers. That was my mistake. I ran a search on the merchant identification number attached to the Cindervale transfers. It did not lead to a registered business address in the financial district. It routed to a post office box in a strip mall 3 towns over. The owner of the box was listed as Blair Kincaid. The rental fee for the box was paid automatically by a credit card I did not recognize. But when I cross-referenced the last 4 digits with Dylan's credit report, there it was, a managed spending card he had opened 2 years ago. My phone buzzed. I snatched it up, hoping it was my brother, Liam. I had called him twice from the car, but it had gone straight to voicemail. Liam never turned his phone off. It was not Liam. It was a text from an unknown number. "Don't come back alone. They are waiting for a mistake." My stomach tightened. They were watching. They wanted me to panic, to storm back into the house, screaming so they could film it and label me unstable. Before I could process the threat, a notification pinged on my laptop. It was a high-priority email from the compliance department at my firm, Hallowbridge Risk and Ledger. The subject line made the blood drain from my face. Notice of immediate suspension. Pending internal investigation. I clicked it open, my hand trembling slightly on the mouse. The text was formal and devastating. It stated that an anonymous whistleblower had provided credible evidence that I was using my position as a senior auditor to manipulate the assets of vulnerable family members for personal gain. My access to company servers was revoked effective immediately. I sat back, the air leaving my lungs. This was not just about the house. They did not just want me gone. They wanted me professionally dead. They were nuking my credibility so that when I inevitably raised a hand to object to the $8.4 billion deal my son was about to sign, no one would listen to a disgraced auditor under investigation for fraud. They had blocked my income, locked my home, and poisoned my career. They thought this was checkmate. I looked at the clock. It was 2 a.m. I had exactly 24 hours before the next board meeting cycle began. I pulled a fresh legal pad from my bag and wrote down 3 lines in sharp, angry strokes. 1, clear my name and kill the internal investigation. 2, get physical access to Richard Mercer before they drug him into silence. 3, rip the corporate veil off Cindervale Advisory LLC and find out who really owns the signature. You want a villain? I whispered to the empty room. Fine. I will show you exactly what an audit looks like. The sterile scent of industrial cleaner and dying lilies hit me the moment I stepped into the lobby of the Silver Birch Care Center. I walked straight to the reception desk, my heels clicking a sharp, rhythmic warning on the linoleum. I needed to see Richard Mercer before Dylan or Patricia could scrub his mind completely. I am here to see Richard Mercer, I said, pulling out my ID. Room 304. The receptionist, a young woman who had known me by name for 3 years, did not smile. She looked down at her screen, her face flushing pink. I'm sorry. Mrs. Mercer. I mean, Ms. Caldwell, she stammered, correcting herself based on whatever note had been flagged on the file. I can't let you up. The visitor list was updated this morning. Updated by whom I asked, my voice level, by his son. Mr. Dylan Mercer, she said, avoiding my eyes. He filed a new power of attorney document at 9 o'clock this morning. It explicitly removes you from the approved contact list. I felt a cold spike of rage, but I clamped down on it. Rage was useless. Leverage was everything. Get the facility manager. Now! When the manager arrived, looking annoyed and ready to recite policy, I cut him off before he could speak. I placed my phone on the counter, displaying a photo of the medication log I had snapped during my visit last week. My father-in-law is recovering from major hip surgery, I said, speaking fast and low. At 9 o'clock this morning, based on your own standard protocol, he would have been administered his morning dose of heavy painkillers. If you are enforcing a power of attorney signed while a patient was under the influence of narcotics, you are facilitating legal fraud. Do you want Hallowbridge Risk and Ledger to open a compliance audit on your facility regarding patient consent protocols? The manager paled. He knew my job title. He knew I could bury this place in paperwork for the next 5 years. 10 minutes, he whispered, wiping sweat from his upper lip. Supervised. And you didn't hear it from me. When I entered the room, Richard looked small in the hospital bed. The machinery beeped a slow, rhythmic cadence. He blinked at me, his eyes hazy. But when he recognized my face, he reached out with a desperate strength. Marianne, he rasped, his voice sounding like dry leaves. They told me. You were stealing, Dylan said. He said it needed the signature to protect the assets from you. It's okay, Richard, I said, taking his hand. It felt cold. I am not stealing. I am trying to stop them. He fumbled with the hem of his blanket, his fingers shaking as he pulled out a small, brass key attached to a safety pin. He pressed it into my palm, closing my fingers over it tight. Unit 42. He wheezed, his eyes darting to the door where the nurse was watching. Don't trust the computer. Marianne, I don't trust the cloud. I trust paper. It's all in the paper. Time is up, the nurse announced from the doorway. I squeezed Richard's hand one last time and walked out. The key was burning a hole in my pocket. I had the physical access. Now I just needed to find the lock. As I waited for the elevator, the doors slid open with a cheerful chime. Patricia Mercer stood there, flanked by Blair. They were holding a basket of fruit, looking like the picture of concerned family members. When they saw me, the performance dropped for a split second, revealing the smug malice underneath. Patricia stepped out, blocking my path. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on the dark circles under my eyes. You look terrible. Marianne, Patricia said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. So manic. Maybe you should just check yourself in here too. We can pay for a room. Blair giggled, covering her mouth with a manicured hand. It must be so hard, she added, losing everything in one day. I stopped. I looked at Blair, then at Patricia. I did not raise my voice. I did not defend myself. You are mistaken, I said, stepping around them as if they were nothing more than furniture. This isn't a breakdown. This is an investigation. I saw the smile falter on Blair's face as the elevator doors closed between us. She had seen it in my eyes. I wasn't broken. I was focused. I walked out into the parking lot, the rain starting to fall again. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was another email from my company's IT department. Security alert: user accounts locked. Remote access terminated. Device wipe initiated. I stared at the screen. They had done it. They had severed me from the corporate grid. I was now a suspect in my own industry, locked out of the systems I had helped build. I took a deep breath and opened my voice recorder app. I adjusted the settings to automatically record all incoming calls. If they wanted to play dirty, I would play for keeps. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a witness, and the evidence collection had just begun. The storage facility sat on the edge of the industrial district, a graveyard of forgotten possessions behind a rusted chain-link fence. The rain hammered against the corrugated metal roof, creating a deafening, rhythmic drumbeat that isolated me from the rest of the world. I found Unit 42 down a long, flickering hallway that smelled of damp concrete and mothballs. The name on the rental agreement taped to the door was not Richard Mercer. It was listed under his late wife's maiden name, a ghost protecting a secret. I inserted the brass key Richard had pressed into my hand. The lock was stiff, fighting me for a moment before yielding with a heavy, mechanical click. I rolled up the metal door. Inside, there were no piles of old furniture or holiday decorations. There was only a single metal desk, a lamp, and a wall of filing cabinets, their drawers sealed with red wax tape. This was not a storage unit. It was an offline archive. I pulled the chain for the overhead bulb, bathing the room in harsh yellow light. I went straight for the box on the desk, the tape already sliced open. Inside was the black binder labeled Cindervale Advisory LLC. I flipped it open, my auditor's eyes scanning the pages faster than my conscious mind could process. Bank statements, invoices for strategic consulting and lifestyle management, hundreds of thousands of dollars siphoned from the family trust into this shell company. I stopped at a disbursement form. The signature at the bottom read Dylan Mercer, but my breath hitched as I looked closer. The ink was heavy, the loops aggressive. The tail of the letter Y hooked sharply upward and to the left, a flamboyant flourish that Dylan never used. I had seen that exact hook on the handwritten thank you notes Blair sent out after charity galas. You arrogant amateur, I whispered to the empty room. Dylan had not just hired a mistress, he had given her the pen. Tucked behind the ledger was a handwritten letter on yellow legal pad paper. Richard's handwriting was shaky, written before the surgery. Marianne, it began. If you are reading this, my suspicions were right. Dylan and Patricia are moving pieces on a board I can no longer see clearly. I am leaving this key to you because you are the only one who reads the numbers without being blinded by the Mercer name. Follow the paper trail back to your own blood. My own blood. I turned to the filing cabinet. In the back of the bottom drawer, hidden behind tax returns from the 90s, was a thick, dust-covered folder. The label was typed on a vintage typewriter, Caldwell Holdings Restricted. Caldwell, my mother's maiden name. My name. I opened it. The documents inside were dense legal instruments, trust deeds, incorporation papers, and asset schedules. They detailed the ownership structure of a company called North Star Transit Platforms. I knew North Star. Everyone in logistics knew North Star. They were the silent giant of the fintech and shipping world, the back-end infrastructure for half the cargo moving across the Atlantic. I turned the page to the beneficial ownership declaration. There, in black and white, stamped with a seal from a law firm that no longer existed, was the truth that stopped my heart. Beneficial owner Marianne Caldwell. The trust had been set up by my maternal grandfather, a man I was told died bankrupt. He hadn't lost the money. He had hidden it, locking it away in a generation-skipping trust that bypassed my mother and landed silently, invisibly, on me. It was designed to trigger only upon a specific solvency event or a marital dissolution. I leaned against the cold metal desk, the room spinning. I owned North Star. I had been the invisible owner of a logistics empire for a decade, while Dylan complained about my salary as an auditor. Then the final piece of the puzzle slammed into place with the force of a physical blow. My son, Noah. Noah was 22, a prodigy in tech investment, currently the face of a massive acquisition deal. He was leading a consortium to buy the proprietary tracking software division of a major competitor. The deal was valued at $8.4 billion. I scrambled for the North Star asset list. There it was. The software division Noah was buying was a subsidiary of North Star Transit Platforms. "Oh my God," I gasped, the air rushing out of my lungs. "He isn't buying a competitor. He is buying me." If the deal went through while I was still legally married to Dylan, and if the trust structure was exposed, Dylan could claim the assets were marital property due to the commingling of funds via the Cindervale leak. Or worse, they needed me out of the picture to bypass the conflict of interest checks. Dylan did not serve me eviction papers because he fell in love with Blair. He did not lock me out of the house because he was tired of me. He needed the beneficial owner neutralized. He needed me discredited, unstable, and legally incapacitated exactly 24 hours before Noah signed the contract. "They aren't just stealing a house," I said, my voice shaking with a cold, terrifying rage. "They are trying to steal the $8.4 billion asset I didn't even know I had." I grabbed the folder and slammed the drawer shut. I had walked into this unit as a discarded wife looking for leverage. I was walking out as the chairman of the board. I did not wait for the sun to rise. At 4 a.m, I initiated a hostile takeover of my own reputation. I drafted a priority email to the head of global compliance at Hallow Bridge, copying the entire legal counsel. I did not ask for mercy. I demanded an audit. I am voluntarily surrendering my laptop, my phone, and my biometric keys to a forensic third party of your choosing. I typed, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I am also attaching 3 years of correspondence between myself and Richard Mercer, explicitly showing that every financial review I conducted was at his direct written request. If you proceed with this suspension based on an anonymous tip without verifying the source, I will sue this firm for constructive dismissal and defamation. You have 2 hours to acknowledge receipt. I hit send. The silence in the room felt heavy, but it was the silence of a trap snapping shut. By 6 o'clock, the tone from HR had shifted. The initial aggressive notification was replaced by a cautious, terrified reply from a junior legal associate, confirming they were pausing the investigation pending review of new evidence. They realized they were not punishing a rogue employee. They were being used as a weapon in a domestic dispute, and the liability was terrifying them. With my career on life support but stable, I moved to the offensive. I hired 2 attorneys. The first was a pit bull of a divorce lawyer named Elena, who specialized in high-conflict asset division. The second was a quiet, expensive specialist in trust law named Marcus, who I instructed to remain completely invisible. "Do not file anything yet," I told Marcus over the encrypted line. "I want Dylan to think he is fighting a heartbroken wife. If he knows he is fighting a beneficial owner, he will destroy the evidence. We wait until he feels safe." To sell the lie. I sent a text to Dylan. It was humiliating to type, but necessary. "I will have my things out by the deadline. Please don't call the police." I stared at the screen until the read receipt appeared. He didn't reply. He didn't have to. I knew he was smiling. I knew he was showing that text to Blair, clinking glasses to their victory. Then my phone rang. It was Noah. My heart hammered against my ribs. My son. The boy I had protected from the toxicity of the Mercer family for 22 years, now standing in the center of their greed. Mom. Noah's voice was tight, stressed. Dad told me you guys are taking a break. I don't understand. The board is pressuring me to close the North Star deal tomorrow. I can't deal with family drama right now. I have $8.4 billion on the line. I closed my eyes. He sounded so young, yet so burdened. He had no idea he was the laundry machine for their theft. Noah, are you alone? I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. Yeah, I'm in the server room. It's the only quiet place. Mom, why did Dad say you were mentally unstable? He showed me a report from your company. Rage, hot and blinding, flared in my chest. They were poisoning him against me. Listen to me very carefully, I said, gripping the phone. Do not sign that deal. Not yet. Mom, I have to. It's the biggest acquisition in the sector. If I walk, my career is over. Noah, I cut him off. You aren't buying a competitor. You are buying me. There was a long silence on the line. The hum of the servers in the background was the only sound. What? What are you talking about? Noah asked, his voice trembling slightly. The North Star platform, the back-end code, the land rights. It is all held in a blind trust. I found the papers. Noah, I am the beneficial owner. Dad knows. That is why he kicked me out. He needs me incapacitated so he can force the sale through you. That's insane. Noah breathed. Dad wouldn't use me like that. Check the due diligence files, I said, my voice hard. Look for the Cindervale advisory payments in the transaction costs. Ask yourself why your father is pushing so hard for a signature tomorrow. He is selling my assets to you, using your reputation to wash the money. I heard him breathing, fast and shallow. Noah was smart. He was a shark in the water when it came to business. He was connecting the dots, and the picture was breaking his heart. I'm going to throw up, Noah whispered. Don't, I commanded. If you react, they will know. We need a channel, a secure line. Download the encrypted app I used for your dorm security. Do not speak to your father about this. Act like everything is normal. Can you do that, Mom? Noah's voice cracked. He's planning a dinner tonight. He said it's to celebrate the deal. He wants me to bring the final draft. Go to the dinner, I said, a cold plan forming in my mind. I will be there too. He'll throw you out. No, I said. He won't, because I am going to walk in there and let him think he has won. I am going to let him dig his own grave. And then I am going to push him in. The dining room was staged like a theater production. Patricia had clearly orchestrated the seating chart to erase my existence. At the head of the table sat my mother-in-law, looking like a monarch in stiff velvet. On her right was Dylan, and beside him, acting the part of the gracious hostess, was Blair. Noah sat across from them, flanked by two senior partners from the investment firm financing the deal. They were laughing at something Patricia had said, a comfortable scene of corporate royalty preparing to devour a feast. I did not knock. I used the service key they had forgotten to confiscate from my keychain. I walked into the dining room at exactly 7 o'clock, the precise start time listed on the invitation I had intercepted from Noah's digital calendar. I was not wearing the disheveled clothes of a woman evicted in the rain. I wore my charcoal boardroom suit, my hair pulled back in a severe, impeccable knot. I carried nothing but a thin leather portfolio. The laughter died instantly. The silence that followed was heavy, sucking the air out of the room. Dylan half rose from his chair, his face draining of color. Marianne, Dylan stammered, his eyes darting to the investors. We didn't think you were well enough to join us. I am perfectly well, I said, my voice cool and pleasant. I wouldn't miss a celebration for my son's success. I walked to the empty chair next to Noah. The partners, confused by the tension, stood up to shake my hand. I greeted them by name, projecting the absolute stability of a woman who had nothing to hide. Patricia's eyes narrowed into slits. She tapped her crystal goblet with a silver spoon, a sharp, irritated sound. "Well," Patricia said, her smile tight, "since you are here, try not to cause a scene. We are discussing serious business." She turned to Blair. "Blair, darling, would you pour the wine? Marianne looks parched." It was a command, not a request. Blair stood up, picking up the heavy decanter of Cabernet. She walked around the table, the heels I knew Dylan had paid for clicking on the hardwood. She stopped behind me. I felt her presence, the heat of her animosity radiating off her. She reached over my shoulder to fill my glass. Then she tipped the decanter too far. A stream of dark red wine cascaded over the rim of the glass, splashing onto my hand and soaking the cuff of my white silk shirt. The liquid dripped onto the table, staining the linen cloth like a fresh wound. "Oh," Patricia gasped, bringing a hand to her chest in a performance of shock. "Oh, clumsy." "Isn't that just like you?" Marianne. Always making a mess of things, she had flipped the script instantly. In her version of reality, I was the one who had spilled it. I was the erratic one. Dylan was at my side in a second, grabbing a napkin. He leaned in close, pretending to dab at my sleeve, but his voice was a venomous whisper right in my ear. "You see," Dylan hissed, his breath hot against my cheek, "you are embarrassing yourself. You always make everything so difficult. Just leave before you ruin Noah's night." I did not pull away. I did not tremble. I watched the red wine pool on the table, analyzing the viscosity, the spread, the sheer pettiness of the tactic. I took a clean napkin from my lap and calmly wiped my hand. Then, I looked up. I locked eyes with Noah. "Noah," I said, my voice steady and audible to the entire table. "Did you hear exactly what your father just said to me?" Noah went rigid. He looked from his father's flushed, angry face to my calm one. He looked at the wine stain that was clearly the result of Blair's action. Not mine. Blair, sensing the shift in the room, tried to recover. She let out a nervous laugh, retreating to her seat. "It is fine," Blair said, waving her hand dismissively. "It is just wine. We can afford new linens." Especially after the North Star asset migration clears next week. The liquidity projection is huge. The room went dead silent. I turned my head slowly to look at her. The two investors stopped eating. "Asset migration," I repeated softly. "That is proprietary structural data. Blair, that information is not in the public prospectus. How would a lifestyle consultant know about the internal liquidity timeline of a logistics company?" Blair froze. She realized too late that she had just recited confidential data she could have only learned from pillow talk or from viewing documents she had no security clearance to see. Dylan looked like he wanted to vomit. Patricia slammed her hand on the table. "Enough," Patricia snapped. "Marianne, you are clearly drunk. Leave this house." I stood up. I did not look at Dylan. I looked directly at Patricia. "Thank you, Patricia," I said. "Thank you for showing me, and for showing my son, exactly who thinks they are the master of this house, and who is just the servant pouring the wine." I turned and walked toward the archway. I did not look back. I didn't have to. The sound of a chair scraping violently against the floor echoed through the room. "Mom, wait!" It was Noah. He stood up, throwing his napkin onto his untouched plate. He looked at his father, then at his grandmother, with a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. "Noah, sit down," Dylan ordered, his voice cracking. "We have to sign the 'I am not signing anything tonight,'" Noah said, "and I am not staying for dessert." Noah walked over to me, taking my arm. He led me out of the dining room, past the stunned investors and the paralyzed Mistress. As we stepped out into the night air, the heavy oak door slammed shut behind us, sealing the toxicity inside. For the first time in his life, my son had not just chosen a side, he had chosen the truth. The legal assault began at 6 o'clock in the morning, arriving not with a bang, but with the quiet ping of a priority inbox notification from my lawyer, Elena. Dylan was not waiting for the board meeting. His legal team had filed an ex parte emergency motion, petitioning the court for immediate temporary conservatorship over Richard Mercer. The filing claimed my father-in-law was suffering from advanced cognitive decline and was being unduly influenced by a disgruntled family member. That meant me. Their goal was simple freeze Richard legally so that even if I produced the trust documents, his signature verifying my ownership would be deemed invalid. They are trying to lock the chessboard before we can make a move, Elena said over the speakerphone, her voice tight with caffeine and adrenaline. If the judge grants this temporary order, Richard is legally a ghost until a hearing next month. You need to stop the money before they get the gavel. As if on cue, a red alert flashed on the second monitor I had set up in our makeshift command center. I had set a tripwire notification for any transaction over $50,000 involving the legacy accounts associated with the North Star Trust. It is happening, I said, typing furiously to trace the origin. There is a wire transfer initiation, $12 million. Destination is an offshore shell account in the Caymans. It was authorized 3 minutes ago. Noah, who was pacing the small room, stopped dead. He looked at the screen, his face pale. 3 minutes ago, Noah asked. Dad just left the house. I saw his location tracker move. How is he authorizing a transfer that size from the car grandfather uses a biometric token and a trusted device key for anything over 10,000? I stared at the metadata. The authorization code was valid. The biometric fingerprint match was confirmed. That meant they weren't hacking the system. They were using a device the system already trusted implicitly. He has a device, I said, my mind racing through the inventory of electronics in the Mercer house. He has something of Richard's, or something mirroring Richard's access. Noah's eyes widened, realizing the betrayal. My laptop, Noah whispered, his voice cracking. Last week, Dad asked to borrow my MacBook Pro. He said his printer driver was glitched, and he needed to print the contracts. He never gave it back. Is that laptop a trusted device on the family server? Yes, Noah said, looking sick. And I have admin privileges for the estate network because I set it up. If he spoofed grandfather's biometric data, which he could get from the medical files, he is using my machine as the clean gateway. They were looting the company using my son's digital fingerprint. I did not hesitate. I did not call the lawyers. I called the fraud prevention unit at the bank, bypassing the standard customer service line and using the direct code I knew from my years in auditing. This is a priority 1 security breach, I said into the headset, my voice ice cold. I am reporting a stolen device with admin-level access to the North Star liquidity accounts. The user is Noah Mercer. He is sitting right next to me, and he is not the one executing the current transaction. We need to verify identity. The agent said, Do it fast! I snapped, If that $12 million clears, the liability falls on your security protocols for failing to flag a device reported as compromised. Initiate the kill switch, now. On the screen, the transfer status bar hovered at 90%. My heart hammered against my ribs. If the money left the country, it was gone. Suddenly, the bar turned yellow, then red. Status pending review. Account frozen. I exhaled, a sound that was half laugh, half sob. We had bought ourselves hours, maybe a day. The bank would require physical verification before releasing the funds. 10 seconds later, my phone rang. It was Dylan. I held up a hand to silence Noah. I tapped the record button on my app and put the phone on speaker. Marianne, Dylan's voice was low, trembling with a rage he could barely contain. "What? What did you just do? I protected the family assets," I said calmly. "From theft." "You are making a mistake," Dylan hissed. "A very expensive mistake. You think you have leverage. I have the tax files for your little consulting gig from 4 years ago. And I have, interesting, discrepancies in Noah's college fund reporting. If this deal doesn't go through, or if that money doesn't clear by noon, I will leak it all. You will go to prison for tax evasion, and Noah will be unhireable." I looked at Noah. He was shaking his head, signaling that his taxes were clean. Dylan was bluffing, or worse. He had fabricated evidence. "Are you blackmailing me, Dylan?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "Are you conditioning the release of stolen funds on my silence regarding a crime I am telling you how the world works?" he shouted. "Losing control? You are nobody. You are just the help we let sleep in the master bedroom undo the freeze, or I burn everything down." "You are right," I said. "I am nobody. Goodbye. Dylan." I ended the call and immediately forwarded the audio file to Elena and the forensic investigator. He thinks that call was a weapon. I said to Noah, watching the file upload complete, "He doesn't realize he just handed us a confession for attempted extortion and wire fraud." The trap was set. Now. We just had to wait for him to walk into the room where the real judges sat. The conference room at the headquarters of the merging law firm was a fortress of glass and steel, chosen specifically by Noah for its neutrality. It was 10 o'clock in the morning. The air conditioning was set to a chilling 65 degrees, keeping the atmosphere sharp and uncomfortable. I sat at the far end of the mahogany table, positioning myself as an external consultant, my back to the window, my face partially obscured by the glare of the morning sun. Dylan and Blair arrived 5 minutes late, projecting the casual arrogance of victors. They believed I was at home packing boxes, or perhaps weeping in a lawyer's office. They took seats near the head of the table, flanking Noah like royal guards. Blair placed a designer notebook on the table, trying to look like she understood the complexities of a cross-border acquisition. Noah did not stand up to greet them. He kept his eyes on the tablet in front of him. "Let's begin," Noah said, his voice stripped of any familial warmth. "Before we execute the final signatures for the $8.4 billion transfer, there is one final compliance check required by the Oversight Committee. We need to review Addendum 4. Dylan frowned, adjusting his silk tie. Addendum 4. We cleared all the schedules last week. Noah, we don't have time for bureaucratic filler. The market opens in 30 minutes. It is not filler, I said, speaking for the first time. Dylan's head snapped toward me. Blair let out a small, strangled gasp. I leaned forward, moving out of the glare so they could see me clearly. I was not the broken woman from the dining room. I was the auditor who had just balanced the books. It is a mandatory disclosure regarding the ultimate beneficial ownership of North Star Transit platforms, I continued, sliding a thin file folder across the polished wood, standard procedure to prevent post-merger litigation. What is she doing here? Dylan demanded, standing up. Noah, get her out. She is legally compromised. She has no standing in this deal. Actually, Noah said, not looking up. She is the only one with standing. Sit down, Dad. On the large monitor at the end of the room, a video link flickered to life. It was the face of Marcus, the independent trustee I had contacted only hours before. He sat in front of a wall of legal texts, his expression grave. Mr. Mercer, Marcus's voice boomed through the surround speakers. I am the acting fiduciary for the Caldwell Restricted Trust. I am here to formally certify that the sole beneficial owner of North Star Transit platforms and all its subsidiary technologies is Mrs. Marianne Caldwell. This ownership was triggered and irrevocably solidified upon the filing of your divorce petition yesterday afternoon. The silence that followed was absolute. Dylan sank back into his chair, his face draining of blood until he looked like a wax figure. The pen he had been holding clattered onto the table. He had spent months trying to force me out of my house, unaware that his own legal aggression had locked the shackles around his wrists. Blair, realizing the ship was sinking, tried to scream for a life raft. "This is ridiculous," she cried out, her voice shrill and desperate. "You can't listen to her. She is under internal investigation for fraud. Her own company locked her out. She is mentally unstable." I didn't even look at her. I placed a single sheet of paper on the table. It was the letter I had received at 6 o'clock that morning from the global head of HR. That investigation was closed 3 hours ago, I said, my voice calm and deadly. The forensic team traced the anonymous tip back to an IP address registered to a burner phone purchased by Cindervale Advisory LLC. It seems the accuser was not a whistleblower, but a co-conspirator trying to manipulate stock prices. I looked at the lead attorney for the investment bank. He was reading the letter, his eyebrows climbing toward his hairline. "This is a clean letter of exoneration," the attorney muttered. "She is clear." The tip was malicious. Noah finally looked at his father. His eyes were not angry. They were empty, which was far worse. "Dad," Noah said, the word hanging heavy in the air. "You told me Mom was trying to sabotage the deal. You told me she was stealing. But for months. You have been pushing me to buy a company that she already owns. What exactly were you trying to make me sign?" Dylan opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at the billions on the table, then at me. He realized the trap hadn't been sprung today. It had been sprung the moment he underestimated me. "The deal stands," I said, addressing the board members and ignoring my husband entirely. "The asset is solid. The technology is sound. But as the majority owner, I have one non-negotiable condition for closing." I pointed a finger at Dylan. "The current management structure is compromised by a conflict of interest and attempted fraud. I will not sign off on the transfer of North Star assets as long as Dylan Mercer or any affiliate of Cindervale Advisory has a seat at this table." The lead investor didn't hesitate. He closed his folder and looked at Dylan. "Mr. Mercer," the investor said, his voice professional and cold, "I think it would be best if you excused yourself. Security will escort you to the lobby." Dylan stared at me, his eyes wide with shock. He had expected a screaming match. Instead, he was being erased by a procedural vote. Noah Dylan pleaded, turning to his son. "You can't let them get out," Noah whispered. "Before I call the police myself." Dylan decided that if he could not rule the kingdom, he would burn the castle to the ground with everyone inside. By 6 o'clock in the evening, my phone was lighting up with notifications from the Wexler Heights community app. Dylan had posted a long, rambling manifesto claiming I was suffering from a psychotic break and that I had embezzled family funds to sabotage our son's future. He had even carbon copied the local Gazette, leaking selected out-of-context emails where I discussed aggressive investment strategies. Trying to paint me as a reckless gambler, I did not respond. I simply forwarded the screenshots to my defamation lawyer with a single note added to the pile. But the real damage was happening in the shadows. Noah arrived at my temporary apartment an hour later, his face gray and drawn. He didn't say hello. He walked straight to the table and dropped a heavy binder on top of my own files. "Grandmother called me," Noah said, his voice hollow. "She was crying. She said you were trying to steal my inheritance. She said, the North Star deal was the only way to save me from your greed. She is desperate." "Noah," I said gently, "lies are the only currency she has left." "It's not just lies, Mom," Noah whispered, opening the binder. I looked into the education trust she set up for me when I was 10, the Grandmother's Gift Fund, the one that paid for prep school and Harvard. He pointed to a transaction log from 12 years ago. "Look at the source of funds," he said, his finger trembling. It didn't come from her estate. It came from a recurring dividend payment from North Star transit platforms. routed through Cindervale Advisory. I felt a chill go down my spine. They hadn't just stolen from me, they had used my son as the unwitting vessel to launder the money. Every tuition check, every dorm fee, every book he had bought was paid for with stolen equity, washed clean through a trust in his name. If the authorities dug deep enough, Noah could be implicated as a beneficiary of fraud. She used me. Noah choked out, tears welling in his eyes. She used a 10-year-old boy as a tax shelter. I stood up and grabbed his shoulders, forcing him to look at me. "Listen to me," I commanded, my voice fierce. "You did not know. Intent is everything in the law. I am going to bury them, Noah. But I will build a wall around you so high that not a single speck of dirt touches you. You are the victim here, not the accomplice. Do you trust me? I don't know who else is left," he whispered. At 11 o'clock that night, the phone rang. It was Dylan. The deadline for the deal closing was 9 the next morning. He was running out of road. I answered on the first ring, the recorder running. "It is over. Marianne," Dylan said. He sounded drunk, or manic, or both. "I have the file. The one from your therapy sessions 3 years ago. The one where you talk about your pressure, your anxiety. I will leak it to the board. I will leak it to the press. They will declare you mentally unfit to hold the beneficial ownership. You are pathetic," I said, my voice steady. "You want to weaponize my mental health? Go ahead. It won't change the fact that you stole $12 million this morning." "I didn't steal it," Dylan shouted, his voice cracking. "It was family money. We needed liquidity. You used a spoofed biometric ID to bypass a federal banking freeze," I said coldly. "That is 20 years in federal prison. Dylan, minimum. I have the logs. I have the device ID. I have everything. You can't prove it was me. I don't have to prove it was you." I bluffed, tightening the noose. "The bank already traced the geolocation to your car." Silence stretched on the line, heavy and suffocating. Then, the dam broke. "It wasn't my idea," Dylan screamed, the desperation tearing his composure apart. "It was Patricia. She said she handled the trustee. She said the waiver was solid, I just signed what she gave me. And Blair just followed the plan to distract you. I was just trying to protect the family." I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. There it was. The confession. He had just implicated his mother and his mistress in a criminal conspiracy to defraud a trust. "Thank you, Dylan," I said softly. "You just saved me a lot of time in court. Wait. Marianne. Wait." I hung up. I immediately exported the audio file and sent it to the forensic accountant, the FBI's Financial Crimes Division tip line, and my lawyer. "What happens now?" Noah asked from the couch, looking like a ghost. "Now," I said, picking up my phone to draft the request for an emergency protective order. "Now we go to sleep, because tomorrow morning, I am going to walk into that boardroom and turn off the lights on the Mercer dynasty forever." The sun rose over the city not with warmth, but with the cold, hard clarity of a judgment day. By 8 o'clock in the morning, the emergency hearing was already over. The judge had reviewed the trust documents, the biometric logs, and the sworn affidavit from the independent trustee. The ruling was swift and devastating. I was formally recognized as the sole beneficial owner of North Star Transit platforms. Additionally, the court issued a temporary restraining order barring Dylan Mercer from executing any financial transaction related to the company or the family estate. The forensic evidence was the final nail in the coffin. The bank confirmed that the $12 million transfer initiated yesterday carried a biometric signature that matched Dylan's profile, but the geolocation placed the device in his car, miles away from the authorized terminal. The federal banking authorities immediately froze the accounts pending a criminal investigation for wire fraud. Dylan had lost his ability to buy a lawyer, let alone buy a way out of the country. Patricia tried to play her final card in the hallway outside the courtroom. She wept, clutching her pearl necklace, claiming she had moved the funds to protect the family legacy. "I did it for us." Patricia sobbed, looking at the judge who was walking past. "I did it to keep the family together." The judge did not stop walking. He simply glanced at the paper trail that showed money flowing from the education of her grandson into her private vanity accounts. The law does not care about tears when the ledger shows theft. Blair was the first to break. When the forensic accountant produced her contract with Cinder Vale Advisory, listing her as an image consultant paid with misappropriated funds, she panicked. "I didn't know," Blair screamed, pointing a shaking finger at Dylan. "He told me it was legal." He said it was his money. I just signed what he gave me." She was incriminating herself with every breath, dragging herself into the center of the conspiracy she thought she was too pretty to be charged for. An hour later, I stood in the boardroom for the final signing of the $8.4 billion deal. The atmosphere was sterile and silent. Dylan was not there. He was being detained for questioning. I looked at the board members and laid down my single condition. "The deal proceeds," I said, my voice echoing off the glass walls. "But we are restructuring the equity. The Mercer Family Trust is completely excised from the payout. The proceeds will be placed in a secured fund to protect the pension plans of the North Star employees and the minority shareholders. Dylan and Patricia Mercer get zero." The board chairman nodded. It was a harsh term, but they knew it was the only way to save the merger from a corruption scandal. Noah sat at the head of the table. He looked older than his 22 years. He picked up the heavy fountain pen. His hand trembled slightly, but his eyes were clear. "I am not buying this company to enrich the people who tricked my mother," Noah said softly. He signed his name with a sharp, decisive scratch of the nib. He stood up and walked over to stand beside me. For a moment, nobody moved. The sight of the mother and son united against the father who had tried to play them both was a more powerful statement than any legal contract. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, the rain had stopped. I pulled my car up to the gate of the Wexler Heights estate. This time, I was not alone. A locksmith and 2 uniformed police officers stood behind me. I handed the court order to the private security guard, the same man who had blocked me yesterday. He read it, paled, and immediately opened the gate. I walked up the driveway. Dylan and Blair were standing on the stone steps. They had packed their bags. Their suitcases were not thrown in the mud. They were standing neatly by the door, because I had allowed them the dignity they had denied me. Patricia stood by her car near the gate, refusing to come closer, stripped of her power to command this house. Dylan looked at me. He looked tired, his expensive suit rumpled, his arrogance completely evaporated. He looked at the house, then at me, as if trying to understand how the power dynamic had flipped so violently in 24 hours. "Marianne," Dylan said, his voice cracking, We can still talk about this. The house. It has always been the Mercer home." "No," I corrected him. "It has been the Caldwell asset. You were just a tenant who forgot to pay rent." The police officer gestured for them to move toward their vehicles. Blair hurried past me without making eye contact, clutching her purse as if it contained the last of her relevance. Dylan lingered for 1 second more. He looked into my eyes, searching for the woman he had married, the woman he thought was weak. "I just wanted you out," he whispered. I looked at him, feeling absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, just the relief of a balanced equation. "You didn't kick me out of the house." "Dylan," I said, my voice quiet and final. "You kicked me out of the illusion." I stepped inside and closed the heavy oak door. The lock clicked shut with a sound like a gunshot, sealing the past outside forever. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear your thoughts and connect with you. Don't forget to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people.